Today we're diving deep into Material UI, the most popular React component library. Whether you're a beginner or looking to level up your MUI skills, this complete tutorial has you covered. We'll go from installation to advanced customization, dark mode, responsive design, localization, and some pro tips that will make you a Material UI expert. Make sure to watch until the end because I'll share some pro tips and techniques that will save you hours of development. If this sounds valuable, smash that subscribe button and let's get started. First of all, we need to install the MUI package itself, the emotion, CSS in JS engine, icons, and our desired font. Previously, I have created an empty folder for my project, and then I'm going to create a simple React project in this folder using Vite. I'm going to install the latest version of Vite on my system. Then I'm going to choose React and TypeScript Vite SWC. Hit enter. Perfect. Let me just clear the terminal and close Explorer. Then I'm going to install the Material UI core library. Then the emotion CSS in JS engine, which is required by MUI. Then the emotion style package to create React components with a style. And then the icons package of MUI, which has a complete set of icons that we can use in our application. Then hit enter. Perfect. Now we need to select and install a font for application. The easiest way and recommended way by MUI is installing our fonts using font source, library, and website. And as you can see here, we have many options to choose from. And for this tutorial, I'm gonna go with Poppins font because I like the look of it. Click on it. And here, click on the install tab here. Then follow the instructions. Copy the installation command and paste it inside your terminal. Hit enter. Perfect. Then I need to import the installed package on my project. So first of all, I need to specify which font weights I want to import. The recommended font weights by MUI is 300, 400, 500, and 700, but depending on your project, you can customize it and import other types of font weights. Click on copy here, then open the file explorer, and here, first of all, I'm gonna remove the app.css because we don't need it. Then open the app.tsx and remove the app.css import here. And also I'm gonna remove all other import. Then for the app component, I'm just gonna simply return a hello world phrase here. Then inside the index.css file, which is the main entry of your application for CSS styles, and here remove everything, then close it because we do not want any initial styling for now. Then inside the main.tsx file here, I'm gonna paste the copied font weights from font source. Hit save. Then from the font source website, copy the last snippet. Then here in application, head over to the index.css and paste the Poppins font family for your application on the body tag. Now to make sure everything is working, head over to the app.tsx, and then here I'm gonna import our first MUI component, which is gonna be a simple button, and then inside it I'm gonna type hello world or something. Then I'm gonna start the development server and open it on my browser. And as you can see, we have a very small button for application. After that, the first step is to normalize our initial CSS because as you can see here, we have unnecessary distance between this button and edge of the screen. Let me just make this button filled by using the contained variant for you to see better. As you can see, there is a little bit gap between the button and the edge of the screen. And in every project, we normalize our CSS by removing undesired paddings, margins, and related stuff. But in MUI, it's pretty simple and straightforward. To do that, at the entry point of application, I'm going to import the CssBaseline from MUI, and then I'm going to close it like this. And if you head over to your application, you see that unnecessary and undesired margins and paddings have been removed. And if I open the inspect elements here, you see that there are some new added CSS properties like margin, color, and other stuff, but the current font of our component and the button text, as you can see, is Roboto, which is the default font of MUI, and we're gonna learn how to change it in the future because we have installed the Poppins font on our project. Now we're gonna get familiar with the components provided by MUI and how we can interact with MUI. Offers one of the most comprehensive sets of components available. While it would take an incredibly long time to go through each one in detail, making this tutorial excessively long, there is a more effective approach. The key is to familiarize yourself with what MUI has to offer for different use cases. Whether you want to handle forms and you need specific components like buttons, autocompletes, button groups, and so much other stuff, or if you want to display some data to user like avatars, lists, tables, tooltips, and other stuff, or even if you want to show the user a feedback like loading bars, alerts, or if you want to handle navigation, breadcrumbs, you want to create responsive layouts, MUI has you covered. And also there are so many other small utilities you can use in your application like popovers, modals, click away listeners, and many other stuff that you can learn them and use them from the provided documentation. After that, when you got familiar with the provided components and possibilities of MUI, when you encounter a specific scenario in your project where you need a particular component, you'll remember that MUI likely has a ready-made solution. And after that, you're gonna head over here to the official MUI documentation. Each component's documentation is quite frankly the best in the industry. You'll find complete examples, explore various scenarios to learn from, and then you can dive deep with dedicated API pages here. Whether you can access them from this group in the sidebar, you can open it and you can find the specific desired API you are looking for, or you can, in each component documentation page, you can scroll to the bottom of the documentation, and here you're gonna see which APIs are dedicated to this component. For example, for the autocomplete, we have popper, text field, and autocomplete itself. And if you click on it, you're gonna see the possible properties like providing the options for the open dropdown, what is the render input property, and so much other related stuff to it with complete explanation that you can learn from. In this tutorial, we're gonna focus on the more complex aspects like customization, global theming, and best practices. We'll also walk through a few specific components to illustrate these concepts in action. However, it's your responsibility to explore the vast options, components, and utilities of the MUI documentation. It's very straightforward and exceptionally well done. To show you in action, imagine that in my project, I have a form and I need an input. Then I head over to the documentation and look for the input or text field provided by MUI. Then I'm gonna study the documentation a little bit to learn what are the possible ways that I can interact with this component in my application. For example, what are the different states, variants, and more. And then inside your application, you're gonna import it from Material UI, and then you can use the IntelliSense provided by TypeScript or the language server of your language. You can see the properties like disabled or even native DOM properties, and you can interact with them. And imagine that I want to use the disabled property, and depending on situation, I'm gonna change it to false or true to make it dynamic. And also we have full documentation for each properties. But let me just remove it. Every text field is gonna need a value and also an onChange handler to get the input and update the value here. And let me just create a simple state for this. Then inside the application, I can easily type on it as simple as this. You can also handle the error state. For example, if no value here, I'm gonna change the input to error state, and after the value is presented, I'm gonna change it to my primary color. I can make it disabled if something, for example, is loading, and so much other stuff. But one thing that you need to keep in mind that it is not related to MUI specifically, that every time you're going to use a component, and specifically a font component like this, you should wrap it into another component. Then you're going to abstract the usage of that component. So whenever you wanted to change some logic globally in your application, you're going to change that wrapper component. And then all of the instances that are using that wrap component, and here in this context, wrap text field, are going to be updated accordingly. But this is outside the scope of this tutorial. And let me just remove use properties and this user state and its import. Then I'm going to import another component called a slider. And it has been imported in our application, but I want to find a way to stack these items vertically. So I'm going to head over to the MUI documentation, and inside the all components page, I head over to the layout category to see what MUI here has to offer. And for example, the stack here is a component for arranging elements vertically or horizontally. And under the hood, it's a simple column flex. And it's not a very complex thing, but it's here to make our code organized. To use it, just wrap everything inside this stack here, and then I can increase the gap between the items by 2. But this 2 here does not mean 2 pixels, it means 2 units of MUI spacing. And by default, and we're going to change it in future, the MUI spacing is 8 pixels. So if I put 1 here, the gap between items is going to be 8 pixels. If I'm going to put it 2 is going to be multiplied by 8, and the result is 18 pixels. But let me just remove everything here. You can also do things like this, and the possibilities are endless here. But I prefer using the spacing unit, and you can use this also for width, height, and any other thing related to distance units in your application to make things more organized. And if you head over to your application, you see that we have a vertical layout for our elements with a gap of 16 pixels because we are using 2 units of 8 pixel here, and the gap is going to be 16 pixels. And if I make the screen a little bit smaller, you see that everything is fit to the width of the screen, but I don't want this behavior, and I want everything be centered and has a maximum width. To do it, again, I head over to the MUI page, and here in the sidebar or in the all components page, I head over to the layout category. And previously I knew that there is a component called container that centers everything horizontally, and it's used to create fluid container by providing max width to it. And here in my application, if I wrap everything inside a container, I'm going to put my stack here. You see that now everything has a beautiful padding on the left and right, and also the maximum width is now determined. And then I can change it to the desired value. For example, I'm going to change the max width to, for example, extra small, and I'm going to show you what these breakpoints mean here. And here in your application, you see that everything is now much smaller than before. For icons, MUI provide a very complete set of icons that they are carefully designed. To use them, just head over to the documentation, and in the data display, open the material icons or search it in Google or whatever. And here you can see and look for your desired icons. For example, the pencil icon, you can use it for showing, editing something with different variations for each icon, whether you want it to be filled, outlined, rounded, two-tone, and even sharp. And this icon set here is going to be more than enough for most of the scenarios, and the usage of them is pretty simple. Let me just look for something like, for example, a sparkle, and then I really prefer the rounded version, and then I'm gonna copy the import path of it. Then inside your application, you can paste this here. Then the usage of it is pretty simple. Wherever that you want to use it, just use it as a component here, and here you can see your desired icon wherever that you put it. And you can also change different styling, like change the size of it, for example, into small, and also change the color. For example, I'm going to change it to the error variant on my theme. And as you can see, the icon got a little bit smaller, and also the color of it has been changed. Also, you can use it with different components. For example, the button here provide for us two properties, one for end icon and also another one for a start icon. For example, I'm going to change the start icon to this button, this icon here. So I'm going to pass it again as a component. Then I'm going to change the text to, for example, something like submit, and I'm going to put it after these two form fields. And you can see that we have a beautiful, well-aligned button, carefully designed by MUI team. Now, for the customization section of this tutorial, we have many ways to customize our project, but choosing the right solution for different scenarios is something that we need to pay attention to. The first way is one of customization, which is used to customize a specific component at a specific place. To show you what I mean, I'm going to remove components here. Then I'm going to put the CSS baseline at the above so it doesn't bother us. Hit save. Then I'm going to remove unnecessary imports. And after that, here inside it, I'm going to again import a slider because it's a very good component to show you and demonstrate the possibilities of customization in MUI. Import it and close it. One of the most used customization ways in MUI is using the SX prop, which is going to be something like the style property existing on every DOM elements that we can, for example, change the font size, the color, and many other stuff. The SX property is similar to it, but with many extra options and utilities that we can use them. This is our slider without any styles, and let me just make it also vertically centered. To do that, on your container here, I'm gonna pass SX property. I'm gonna first of all change the height to all of the screen height. I'm gonna change display to flex, justify content centered, and also align items centered. And in your application, you see that our slider has become a circle, which is because the slider component in MUI doesn't have any default widths. So I'm gonna, by using the SX property on slider, I'm gonna change the width to 100 pixels, and now everything is working as expected. Also, we can change the color of it to a direct hex value or even providing the name of the color. But the best practice here is to use the colors defined on your theme object, on your global theme object. To find them, head over to the documentation and look for the theme viewer. I think it's inside the customization. And here in the default theme viewer, you have access to all properties defined by default. And then we are gonna customize these values according to our needs. But for now, to know what colors we can use for our components, open this palette here, and you see that here we have common color, primary, secondary, and other stuff. Here I'm gonna use the success color of our theme on our slider. Then I'm gonna open and see the possible values on it, main, light, dark, and contrast text. I'm gonna choose the main token of our success color. And here for the color, I simply pass the path of it on our palette. I chose success.main here. And here, as you can see, our slider color has been changed totally into the defined success main color token on our theme by default. But how to customize different parts of this slider, which is contained of different components by itself. It has a rail, a thumb, and a track, and also a hidden container that we can customize it according to our needs. But how to do it? Your best friend here is the inspect panel of your browser. Here I'm using Chrome, or whatever that you use is okay. And let me just make the inspect panel a little bit bigger. Then I'm gonna select my component, my slider component here, and then I'm gonna look for the parent of this complex component, which is here. It's not the MUI stack, it's MUI slider dash root, which, as you can see here, it's contained of multiple different elements like a rail, a track, a thumb, and also an input controller. Imagine that I want to customize the thumb component of this. I want to change the color of it to something, for example, red. You need to memorize or copy or whatever the hierarchy of this MUI slider thumb inside this MUI slider root, like exactly how we select things and elements using CSS selector. Just keep this in mind that MUI slider dash thumb is inside the MUI slider dash root. To customize it, inside the S6 property, I'm going to create a new field, and for the key value of it, I need to specify the path of the MUI slider thumb. So here, if I pass the MUI slider dash thumb, and then I'm going to open a new object for it, and for example, change the background color of it to red, you see that nothing has changed because we have forgot to follow this hierarchy here. First of all, we need to select the MUI slider root, then its thumb. So if I do something like this, MUI slider dash root, and also don't forget to put a space here because we are selecting this CSS class inside the CSS parent, but the result here is similar and the color of this thumb hasn't changed because the rule of it is that in every component that we need to customize, by components I mean composed components like a slider which is contained by different components and they are nested in each other, to select a nested class, instead of specifying the root element of it, we are going to use an ampersand sign here, which is exactly equivalent to the root class name of our component. So this means that I'm selecting the thumb slide the MUI slider root of my component. Now, if you head over to your browser, you see that the result is exactly the thing that we wanted. And now, even we have access to CSS state classes like hover, focused, and so much other stuff. For example, I want to make the thumb of my slider whenever it's on hover state, and then I'm going to change the color of it into, for example, something like blue. Hit save, and if I hover over this red thumb here, you see that the color of it has been changed to blue whenever I'm hovering over it. And even you can change the state styles even on the root component. For example, whenever we hover on our slider itself, for example, I'm going to change the color of it, the background color of it, into something like yellow. And now if I hover over it, you see that the color of it is going to be changed to yellow, the root element. Another functional thing that we might need to do is to change the style of our component depending on the states. For example, I'm going to change the slider state and I'm going to put it into a disabled state and hit save. And now here, whenever my slider is disabled, by default MUI makes the track and the slider into a gray color. And let me just make this also gray so you can tell the difference. So let me just remove or comment out unnecessary stylings here for now. And now everything is working as expected. To change the style of different state of MUI components, we need to head over to the MUI documentation, and here in the how to customize section, inside the state classes tab here, you see that there are some states that the native browsers does not know about. For example, something like hover state is native by browser, but some states like checked, error, disabled, focused, and other stuff are not natively supported by the browsers. So we need to handle them using these state classes. For example, I want to change the styling of my component whenever it's disabled. So memorize this component, MUI-disabled, so we're going to use it. Here, whenever we are inspecting our element, our slider element, you see that whenever it's disabled, a new MUI disabled class name has been added to the classes here. So imagine that I want to change the thumb of my component whenever it's disabled into another color. So I need to follow this path. First of all, I need to select the root component. Then I'm going to select whenever it's disabled. And after that, I can easily customize the thumb component itself. To do that, as before, first of all, I need to select the current component. Then I'm going to follow the hierarchy in the DOM. So here I'm going to specify the disabled state here. Then I'm going to, for example, select the MUI slider -thumb here. And then I'm going to change the color of it into red, or if you recall, we can use the error.main, the error state defined on our theme. Hit save. If you head over to application, we see that nothing has changed. This is because we are selecting this thumb here wrong. The MUI disabled and our root are at the same level. But inside our code, we have specified that the MUI disabled is inside our root level. So I need to remove this extra space here. That was to demonstrate you. And now the hierarchy is correct. We want to target the MUI disabled on our root class, root container, and inside it, we're gonna tell that the thumb of it, the thumb of our slider, is inside our parent component. Then we can easily select it and customize it according to our needs. And as you can see here, whenever our slider is in disabled state, the color of it has been changed to our error state, which is exactly what we want. Also, you can remove this extra space and ampersand here because this and this here are exactly the same. So for simplicity, I'm going to remove them. And the result is exactly the same. And also, if you do not prefer this nested syntax, you can use it inline. I can easily select the disabled state of my component, and exactly beside it, I'm going to choose the MUI. For example, not this time. The thumb of it, I'm going to select the rail of my slider. Then I'm going to change the color of it into error.main. And you see the rail of my slider has been changed into red by this different way of selecting our desired element. For the next part of the customization section, we're going to learn how to make reusable components with MUI. Create a custom component. In the case of styling, I can simply create a new component called, for example, custom slider, and then I'm gonna import the styled function from MUI material. And if you have worked with different CSS in JS solutions like emotion or styled components, this syntax is familiar to you. But if not, I'm gonna explain it thoroughly. Inside this function, we're gonna provide the root element that we want to customize, which is gonna be our slider. So I'm gonna pass it here. Then we need to specify the type of properties that this custom component accepts. Here, because for now we don't want to customize the initial properties of this component, here I can simply pass the slider props and import it from MUI and pass it here as a generic. After this, I'm gonna open and close braces here, and here we can pass a callback like this, and then I'm gonna return my desired custom styles. For example, I can specify how much width is. For example, I can specify it as 80 pixels or 80 pixels. Explicitly use pixel units or use rem unit or whatever that you want. But the beauty of customizing your components like this is that in this callback, we also have access to many different properties. And the most important one for now is the theme object, which is the initial config provided by MUI. And you can simply get it from this callback. And here, instead of hard coding the value like this, I'm going to use another way so I can access the spacing function on this theme object. Then I can pass my desired value, which here I'm going to provide 10, which here if I multiply 10 by default 8 pixels, I'm going to at the end have 80 pixels that I wanted. So let me just remove these. But before I continue with customizing this way, I forgot to tell you that here, if you want to customize your component using SX property directly, you have access to this theme object. So instead of returning directly an object here for your SX property, you can use the callback syntax and wrap this object inside braces. Then here you have access to the theme object. And for example, I can specify the widths here by using the theme.spacing, or even I can directly have access to the colors, whether I want to choose the success state or any other stuff that you can use it here and follow best practices. But I'm not gonna use the theme object here, so let me just remove the callback and directly return a direct object. So let us just return back to our custom component here. After that, we have access this theme object here. I can, for example, change the color to whatever that I want, but as I told you before, you have access to theme palette and I can change it to success, and I'm gonna use the main token for this component. And even I can use the CSS selectors, and I can, as before, customize whatever part of the component that I want. For example, I'm going to change the thumb and I'm going to change its hover state. And also I'm going to provide a state class that whenever my component is visible and is focused, I'm going to return a background color of red or green for now. And we can simply use it. Let me just come over here and below our previous slider, or let me just remove this slider. Here I'm going to pass my custom slider for now. But to make our changes visible, let me just change this green into, for example, something like red. And here, as you can see, our custom component is green by default. And whenever I hover over the thumb here, it's going to be red. Also, you can extend the behavior of this custom slider, and you can also pass external custom properties to it. The way that we can do it is that create a new type called custom slider props or whatever that you desire. Then, first of all, I'm going to use the default slider properties. Then I'm going to merge it with custom properties that I want. For example, I'm going to specify error state, and it's going to be optional, and it's type of Boolean here. And instead of passing the slider props here, I'm going to pass the custom slider props. And to use this error property and make our custom component dynamic, here at this place that we are specifying our base component, I'm going to pass a second argument or second object here. And here I should specify that what properties should be forwarded wherever I'm using this by providing a should forward prop. So by default, I need that all of my properties to be forwarded to this custom config here. But I want the new property here to not be directly forwarded to this config here. So instead of passing all of the properties, I'm going to pass all of them instead of this error, this new property error here. Hit save, and here put a comma here in this callback. As you can see, we have access to this new created property for our custom component. Now we can easily access this error property, and for example, I'm going to change the background color of my MUI thumb dynamically according to these error properties. So if the error is provided, I simply return red, and if not, I'm going to return green or whatever that you want. And here that we use this component, I'm going to provide the error property, the optional error property. And here, because I have passed the error property, if I hover over it, we see that the component becomes red. And if I remove the error here, we see that whenever I hover over it, the component is the same as before. Another way to customize is using global theme overrides, which you define all of your desired preferences and the desired design system globally on your theme object, and there is no need for you to do them one by one for each component or custom properties, custom components that we create. So this way should be your main priority, and if there was something that was not possible by overriding your global custom theme object, you can use other ways that we talked about before. To override your global theme object, you're going to create a new variable called whatever that you want. I'm going to call it theme here, and then you're going to call the create theme and import it from MUI material. Then inside it, you have access to almost everything related to your components, your palette, default spacing, breakpoints, and whatever that you want. So let's get into it. First of all, I want to change the default font of my components. I'm going to change the font family globally into Poppins font that we just installed earlier. Then to use this variable, you just need to simply wrap everything in your application inside a theme provider. Make sure you're importing it from MUI material. Then you're going to pass, let me just import it again. And then you're going to pass the theme property, the theme object that we just created. And let me just create a new button here for you to show the default font has been changed. For example, I'm going to change it to Summit. And here, if you inspect this element here, you see that the font is now Poppins instead of Roboto. Also, we can do many other stuff here. We have access to the components object here, and we can almost customize all of the components here. We have access to accordion, alert, badge, buttons, and whatever that you want. And here I'm gonna show you how to customize the button here on your theme object. So you can select your desired component here. And here you have access to default props, style overrides, and variant. For the default properties, I'm gonna simply disable ripple effect. So I'm gonna pass it as true. And then I'm gonna pass the default variant into content instead of being text. And here you can see the button here, and all of our buttons inside our application now don't have any ripple effect whenever we click on it. And also the default variant is contained. Besides default properties that you can customize, you can also override the default styles for all of your buttons inside your application. Another thing that I should mention before it is that you can use the theme scoping for application. You can use theme provider inside other theme providers and use different theme configs for different parts of your application. For example, I can create a new theme configuration, then I'm gonna pass different customization for different part of my application. Like this, I'm gonna pass the theme 2 here, and then I'm gonna render text fields or whatever that I want. Just keep this in mind. And let me just remove unnecessary stuff here. I'm gonna override the default styles of my button. There are so many variants and different states here. For example, you can only update the content variant, disable state, and many other states that your button can have. But the recommended way by documentation is to select the root object here and do your customization here. And here I can customize my button stylings for all other possible states and variants. So for example, I'm going to change the font size, default font size to 2rem, and here you can see the button font got bigger. And the way that we can customize different possible variants and states for our button is to pass a variants array here. So here I can pass multiple different objects here, and for the first one I'm gonna pass a props, which is gonna be another object. And also each array for our variants also accepts another object that you need to pass is to what custom styling you want to be applied whenever that these properties have been passed. And here I'm gonna use another object here. Then I'm gonna tell MUI engine that whenever my variant is, for example, is of type outlined, and whenever the color of it, for example, is of type secondary, I'm gonna change the default font size into 1/2rem, so make it smaller. Also, I could have done only a single rule for it, but you can add so many other rules according to your conditions. And I'm gonna give you only ideas. And to show you what it does is that here, beside my default button, I'm gonna create a new button. For example, call it, for example, custom variant, and I'm gonna pass the rule that I defined here. I'm gonna pass the variant to outline and color to secondary. So here I'm gonna pass the variant outlined, and then for the color I'm gonna pass the secondary, and this will cause this style override be activated. So if you head over to application, you see that whenever the color of my button is secondary and also the variant is outlined, the font size is gonna be 1/2rem. And also if one of the rules is not satisfied, it's safe, you see that the custom style overrides is not applied. Also, I can add another object here to the variants, and for the props, I'm gonna pass the variant dashed, and for the style of it, I'm gonna change the border of it into 4 pixel dashed. Let me just use backticks here, so I'm gonna use dynamic values here. I'm gonna pass 4 pixel as the width of my border, and I'm gonna use the dashed style for my border, and also I'm gonna use a color here. But to show you what is possible, MUI provides us with colors utility, and you can import it from MUI material colors, and each of these colors here, whether it's yellow, red, green, or whatever, you have access to different shades of it. So here I'm gonna use 500 here, and all of these colors are following the MUI standards and they are carefully picked. But you could have used the red here or your desired hex color. But here for you to see the possibilities, I'm going to pass the 500 shade of red color imported from MUI material colors. Now here I'm going to create a new button and I'm going to pass the dash text here. And for the variant of it, I'm going to pass the dashed here. But as you can see, the dashed variant that we just created now is not valid and MUI doesn't know it. So we have content, outline, and text here. So if we want to add different and custom variants for our components, we need to use module augmentation provided by TypeScript that we can override the types of other modules and libraries from our project. To do that, we need to create a new file. I'm going to create it inside the types folder, and here I'm going to create a new file called MUI or whatever, but as we are declaring types globally for application with the format of TS. So this d.ts is very important at the end. Hit enter, and here I'm going to use the declare module keywords. Then I need to specify that what types of MUI library I need to enhance. So I'm going to pass the path of button inside MUI package, and then I'm going to enhance the button props variants overrides with the new variant that I want. I need the dashed variant and I'm going to pass it as true. And if you don't know where to get this import paths or what to put here, you just need to head over to your button and go to the definition of it, hit F12 or whatever the shortcut key on your system. And here at the top of this button.d.ts file, which is installed by default inside your node modules, you can see if you want to override the variants, you're going to pass this interface. If you want to override the color, sizes, and other stuff, you can copy these, and then inside your MUI.d.ts, you can pass it here and add whatever that you want. But we have a problem here. If you head over to our app.tsx file, we see that even now, the dash property, the dash variant is not recognized by MUI, because we need to find a way to tell TypeScript that we are using module augmentation here. And the way to do it is that we need to export something or an empty object here or import something else. And to make things easier to understand, I'm going to import the MUI package types here inside the module declaration. And if I head over to our app.tsx file, you see that the dashed variant is now recognized by MUI engine. So we have successfully done the module augmentation inside application. And if you head over to application, we see that we have added a new variant for our buttons, which is dashed version, and it is not provided by default by MUI. So this is a very powerful trick that you can do with MUI and TypeScript. Also, you can change the typography of your button here, but I really prefer to do them here inside the typography object here. And for each component, let me just open the IntelliSense. And for example, here you can pass the button, and for all of your buttons inside your application, you can change the default font size to whatever that you want. And with this way, you can easily handle and manage all of things related to typography inside your application, whether it's global font sizes, for example, for different HTML tags, and even your components, which is a little bit more maintainable and understandable in the future that you have done all things related to the settings for your typography inside one object here. But the possibilities are endless here. Also, another cool things to do that we can do with the variants here, let me just show you by its example. Instead of passing the props an object here, I'm gonna use the callback version of it, and here for the variant rule, I'm gonna specify that whenever the variant, let me just make it an arrow function here, whenever the variant on it is equal to dashed, and also whenever the color of it is not equal to secondary, hit save, I'm gonna override with this style here, for example 2 pixels dashed, and also pass the blue color with 500 shade of it. So we can do dynamic stuff with these properties here like this. And to show you, here at the bottom of our file, we had previously a button with the dash variant where the color of it is not secondary. So the rule is applied and we should expect the border of it be color blue. And here the result is exactly what we expected, and the border of this component is blue with smaller widths. Also, if you don't like overriding the variants like this syntax, and if it is hard for you, you can outside the root object here explicitly select the variant that you want, and you can do whatever that you want. But as I told you before, the options here are pretty limited and you have only access to a few properties here, but it's your choice. Another way to customize is using global CSS override. What does it mean? We can easily customize our default native elements, specifically provided by this CSS baseline here. So inside the components object here, also you have access to MUI CSS baseline here, and you can override it like this by getting the theme parameters or whatever that you want to call it. But here it's a little bit trickier because you need to pass a backtick here to override the native elements overridden by this CSS baseline, which is normalizing our CSS. So here we just need to simply pass CSS syntax, and for example for the color of my h1 tag, I simply pass the theme param, and I'm going to pass the palette and the success color. Also you could have used the theme name here, but the option is yours. And let me just make it nested. Perfect. And to see it in action, let me just create an h1 tag using typography component. Here I simply pass the h1 here for the text of it, and for the variant of it I simply pass the h1 also another h2 to show you what it does. And as you can see, the h1 tag has a green color, but the h2 tag as before is a black color. One of the most common things that we do in modern web application is dark mode and interacting with the theme palettes, primary, secondary and tertiary colors for our project. But before we continue, I really appreciate that you press that subscribe and like button, as it really helps my YouTube channel to grow, and also you will see more contents like this. So I really appreciate it if you like, comment and subscribe my channel. First of all, we need to create a new component which is responsible to toggle our theme, whether it's a switch between light or dark, multiple buttons, but here I prefer to use the radio buttons. So create a new component called theme toggle, and then I simply return a radio group from MUI. Then inside it, I'm gonna for each state of my theme, whether it's system preference, dark or light, I simply create a form control label, and for the controller of it, I simply pass a radio component from MUI. I want the value of it be system and the label of it be system, and copy and paste it multiple times. One for light mode, and I'm calling it light, and another one for dark with the value of dark. Then I'm going to use this component, for example, inside my container here. Let me just put it inside the stack to make things visually better. So I'm going to put it here, hit save, and then I'm going to zoom out a little bit for things to be visible. As you can see, the theme toggle component is here, and we can easily switch between different states. But if you see here, nothing happens whenever we change the state of our theme. So let's fix it. To fix it inside your theme toggle component, first of all, I need to get and specify a value for this radio group, and also what will happen whenever one of our radios change. So MUI provides for us a hook called use color scheme, which is going to return for us a mode and also a mode setter that we can access and interact with our theme. Then for the value, I simply pass the mode, which is going to be dark, light, system and undefined. And for the unchanged property here, I get the event or E from my radio group. Then I'm going to update my mode by passing the set mode dispatcher and pass the event.target.value. And to make TypeScript satisfy, I simply tell it that it's going to be of type system, light and dark. Hit save. Here, if you again try to change your theme toggler, you see that even now nothing happens. So let's fix it again. We need to tell the created theme object here that we are using dark mode. So here we have access to another object called color schemes, and it's simply inside it, simply just pass dark true and hit save. And now by default, it has switched to my system preference, which is dark mode. Also, I can switch between light and dark mode. And between refreshes, my desired color scheme has been saved correctly. But there's a problem here that we need to handle, is that on first component mounting, you see that there is no selected option here, which is pretty simple to fix. So here, head over to your theme toggle components here, and on initial mounting, the mode here is going to be undefined or null and is causing that empty state there. To fix that, if no mode is provided, just simply return null. Hit save, and if you refresh the page, you see that everything is handled perfectly. Between refreshes, everything is saved automatically and handled by MUI. You can also add your desired icons or whatever that you want, but for this tutorial, this is enough. And then we can go so much further. We can also customize our light mode and even our dark mode color palettes. And we can override the different styles. For the dark color scheme of my application, for the palette, I simply pass for the primary color a custom color. To do that, let me just open up the IntelliSense here. You see that we have main and different shades of our primary or even other colors like secondary or whatever color that we want to customize. But the most important ones are the dark, light, and also the first one, the main token here. And all other shades will be automatically generated by MUI engine. So for the main token of primary color, I simply pass a color, whatever that you like here. I simply pass a hex color here. And if you like, you can pass dark color for your primary and even the light color here. But just keep this in mind that you only need to pass the main color here, which is necessary. But if you don't pass other different tokens, they will be automatically generated from this main color here with correct contrast between different backgrounds and foregrounds. If you have specific design patterns and design systems for your project, you can add them here exactly like them. Now here in our application, we see that every component that are using the primary color variant are gonna be the color that we just specified on dark mode. But if I change it to light, you see that the default MUI primary color is using, and whenever I switch again to dark mode, you see that the color will be switched automatic. So we can specify different palettes for different types for our theme. I'm going to show you different possibilities. For the light palette here, I simply pass the primary color into red or hex of it or whatever that I like. But MUI also provides for us some utilities that we can manipulate the colors for application. There is a utility called alpha, and you can import it from MUI material. Hit enter, and inside it, I can pass my desired color, whatever that I like, and I can also specify the opacity of it. So hit save, and whenever I switch to light mode, we see that we have a less vibrant version of red color here. And also, as I told you before, there's no need for you to provide dark, light, and contrast text, which is required by MUI, and all of them are gonna be automatically generated by MUI. But do not mess this light or dark token here inside the light color scheme, and it's not related to this, and it's gonna be used under the hood by MUI, which on some components we need to have access to the darker version of our token, our main token, or even the lighter version of it. So keep this in mind. And also we can do something else. For example, for the secondary color scheme, I simply pass the purple color and import it from MUI material. MUI material like this. So instead of passing the colors one by one, you just need to simply pass your desired color from default palette from material design system. So if I change, for example, the last button color to, for example, secondary, you see that it's not become purple. This is because of that we have specified on our variants for button that whenever our variant is dash and color secondary, we here override the color of our button. So to show you another example, I simply create a button with only changing the color of it, and then I simply pass it, for example, something like secondary. And here you see that the secondary color of our application is now purple. And here everything is accessible by default, the hover states, the focus states, and everything is carefully picked by material theme and are really good on different skin sizes and for different people. And they are visually readable on different backgrounds and foregrounds. But imagine that I want to override the default color palette. Here, as you can see, we have secondary or error or success colors and so much other stuff. But imagine that I want to add a new custom palette, and I'm gonna, for example, select the lime from MUI material colors. But as you can see here, the new custom palette here is not recognizable by MUI. So we need to again use module augmentation by TypeScript. So inside your MUI.d.ts file, I'm going to declare another module, the MUI material and styles this time. Then for the interface, for the palette interface, I simply add my desired custom variant, and I'm going to change the initial type of it, for example, something like primary. And also I'm going to repeat it for the palette options, and I'm going to provide it but as an optional property. And again, I here pass the palette options with the primary type of it. This is the way of doing it and recommended by MUI. And so whenever you wanted to add custom default variants for your color palettes, you can do it like this. Now, if you head back to our component, you see that now custom property is now recognized by MUI and TypeScript. And to show you how it looks, at the bottom of our component here, I simply add a new button, call it lime, and for the color of it, I simply pass lime here. Sorry, custom here. But as you can see here again, the TypeScript is not happy because we need to also enhance our button using module augmentation, that our button has a new color variant called custom. So to do it, I just need to head over to the definition of button types, and here again at the type of it, at the top of this file, we see that we have an interface exported here called button props color variants color overrides. So copy it and then head over to your MUI.d.ts file, and here before we have done and added a dashed variant for our button, now I simply add another one but for the color this time, and pass the custom, the variant that we added here, custom, and I'm going to pass true for it. And now in my component here, you see that the custom is now recognized by MUI engine. But here in our application, I realized that something is wrong and the color here is not lime. The problem here is that I don't know for what reason we cannot do it for custom, the same thing that we have done for primary and secondary. But I realized that we can do something like this, provide the lime and the shade 500 of it directly for the main token here. And now you can see that the color, that our new custom color is recognized for our custom button here. And also another thing that I want to tell you is that we can also change the color whenever you are using the S6 property on your component depending on the theme mode. So to do that, instead of passing an object here, pass an array here. And for the first one, we have access to a callback, which we can return the background color, for example, to whatever that we want, for example, to red. And also for the second one, I again get the theme as a callback, and then I'm gonna use the apply styles on it. Then I simply pass the dark variant, and then for example, I change the background color to something like, I don't know, pink. So here, instead of passing an object here, pass an array here. For the first one, get the theme as a callback here. And for example, this is the primary variant for my component, which is light mode. And then I'm going to return, for example, a color of red. And for the second item of this array, I again access the theme and the apply styles on it. And for the dark mode, I simply have access to style it. So for the dark mode of this component, I, for example, change the color of it to something like blue on dark. Also because we didn't use it, and I'm going to simply remove it. And then I'm going to change the name of it, for example, to something like dark or light. And here on light mode, the color of this button is red, and our dark mode, it's blue. Now for the responsive design, we have many options, and simply we can do whatever that we want. And to start, I'm going to start with grid and container, which are two powerful ways that we can make our designs responsive well on different devices. And to make things easier to follow, let me just remove almost everything here, the container itself, and now we have a starting point. First of all, I'm going to create some buttons here to show you things. So I'm going to create multiple of them and name them accordingly. And if you head over to the application, you see that all these buttons have been aligned by default beside each other. But I can wrap all of these buttons inside a grid component like this. And then I'm going to specify that this is the parent grid by passing the container property. But if you see, nothing has happened by now. So after that, we have specified that this grid is going to be our container. We need to also pass every component that you like inside an empty grid like this for each of them. Hit save. And then for each grid, I can specify a property called type. And if I open the IntelliSense here, you see that we have our default breakpoints here, and we can specify that on extra small devices, what happened on extra large small devices, and other breakpoints. So here, I'm going to specify that on our initial breakpoint here, from 1 to 12 number, because we are using a 12 column system, although you can overwrite this 12 number, but there's no need for that. I'm going to specify that the first button occupies 2 spaces, the second button occupies on extra small devices, for example, 4 spaces, and for the last button, I'm going to tell it to specify, for example, 5 spaces. This is the result till now, but as you can see, we cannot tell how much space they are occupying. To fix that, just pass a full width property to each button instead of them being fit content for the width property. And now we can see the widths of these elements are corresponding to whatever we have passed inside our definition. But as you can see here, we have some empty space left here because the total sum of 5, 4, and 2 is 11. And because we are using a 12 column design system by default, we are seeing an empty space at the end of it. So for example, I'm going to change this 2 to 3 to make this summation into 12. Now everything has been fit correctly. Also, you can specify a spacing between components, or you can do them separately for row spacing and column spacing between your different components. But for now, I simply pass the global spacing for row and column. And here we see a spacing between the elements inside our container. And let me show you a practical example. On small devices, because the width is limited, we need to show all of our buttons and only a button on each row. So I'm gonna, for extra small devices, I simply pass 12 column. For medium devices, I simply pass 6, and for the last one also 6. This causes these 2 buttons be on the first row and the last button to be on the second row, because these 2 buttons have occupied the 12 space, and from this point till now, till the end of our grid, this button will occupy the half of that row. And also for larger devices, I'm going to show all of them at a single row like this. And if you head over to application, you see that on small devices, each button occupies 1 row. On medium devices, the first 2 buttons occupy 1 row, and the last button occupies half of the row. And also for extra large devices, we see that all buttons have filled a single row. And also for the size itself, we can, instead of specifying each breakpoint explicitly, we can pass a grow option here, which will calculate the width of this element according to other grids inside our grid container. So here, instead of we having empty spaces, it will be automatically calculated the remaining spaces. So this way of handling responsive designs is mostly suitable for your form elements, inputs, text fields, autocomplete, and other stuff, and is really, really powerful. Also, you can nest different containers inside each other, different grid containers, and inside it, we're gonna have another 12 grid system, 12 column grid system by the remaining columns here. For example, if we have 6 columns here on medium devices, the grids inside this container here also follow a 12 column grid system, but inside this 6 column container. So I can pass a 12 columns for this grid, and it will occupies this container completely. So it's pretty reasonable. And let me just remove it for now. And also we have talked about the container component before. It's for creating fluid designs, and it's pretty simple. You can specify the maximum width of it, for example, to be medium breakpoint defined on our theme object. And now everything has been resized and centered horizontally. Now let's get into breakpoints. By default, MUI has reasonable default breakpoints with these values and pixel sizes, but you can override it according to your needs. You just need to head over to your theme object here and then create and open an object here for customizing your breakpoints. So here just pass the values, and for each of them, for example, for extra large screen, just pass the, for example, 700 pixels, and so much for other values. But another cool thing to do is that we can add different values here. For example, I can add mobile to be 0, tablet to be 640, the laptop be, for example, 1024, and also the desktop to be 1200. But as you can see, again, the TypeScript is not happy. So again, we need to do some module augmentation. To do that, again, just head over to the MUI.d.ts file, and then I'm going to override the default breakpoints variables. So I'm going to tell the MUI and TypeScript that I don't need these default values here, and then I'm going to add and introduce only 4 values for my breakpoints and hit save. And here I had a typo here. As you can see, the errors are gone. And here, if I scroll down a little bit here, you see that even the TypeScript now is not happy because we have removed the default breakpoints from our theme. So we need to change them according to our breakpoints. And instead of, for example, passing XS, I simply pass, for example, desktop or whatever that is required, which is pretty amazing. Let me just revert everything back, and then I'm gonna comment out this code here. That was just to show you. Also, another cool thing to do is that we can customize a specific component directly using CssBaseline, but there is also this issue. Let me just head over again to the augmentation file, and then I'm going to comment out this for now. Now here, also, I can remove these grids here because we do not need them anymore. And here, for example, I can create a new button. I'm going to name it, for example, the responsive button. And here inside the SX property, first of all, I'm going to get the theme config. And then I'm going to, for example, for the background of it, return the color of green. And then I'm going to do dynamic key here. So open an array here and pass the theme breakpoints. And we have many utilities. We have between, down, up, and other values. So I'm going to tell MUI that whenever we are between the extra small devices and, for example, large devices, just simply apply these styles. So I'm gonna change the button color, for example, to something like cyan. And now whenever our button is between extra small devices and large devices, it's gonna be cyan. And whenever we go up to that threshold, our button will become green. Also, you can specify your responsive design on your global theme object. To do that, after that you have created your theme object, we're going to override it because this is not possible by doing it inside whenever we are creating our theme config, and we should do it outside of it. Here I can specify the default font size for my H3 tag. I can easily use CSS media selectors, and depending on the screen that I want, I can simply pass my desired font size, and then I can also use the breakpoints utilities provided by MUI. And for example, on large devices, I simply change the font size of H3 tag to whatever that I desire. And to show you what happened, I'm going to create a new H3 tag here with a variant of H3. And you see that here on different screen sizes, the size of it will be changed automatically. Also, you can use media query hooks provided by MUI. So here in my component, I can, for example, specify a variable called isTablet, and I'm going to set it to use media query. And by using the CSS screen size selectors, I can define my media query like this. And then I can use this value. For example, if isTablet is true, I can simply return tablet, and then if not, I'm going to return not tablet for you to see what is going on. And if it's below that threshold, we're going to see not tablet, and after that, we're going to see the tablet keyword here. So we can use this trick and media query hooks to render stuff dynamically according to our requirements. And also, another cool thing to do is that, for example, I can create a new hook called, for example, use tablet. No, use isTablet, for example, in your hooks folder or something. And then I simply pass this value here, and then I'm going to use this custom hook here. But I made a mistake, just use an arrow function here. And now this is tablet, and this hook is more readable to us. Just keep this in mind. Also, you can do localization for default MUI components easily by default. Let me just remove unnecessary stuff here. And imagine that I have an autocomplete component here. Then I'm going to specify the size of it to be, for example, something like 300 pixels. And to render its input, I'm just following up the documentation for this component. I simply get the parameters passed to this render input property. And for my autocomplete, I'm going to render a text field here, and then I'm going to pass the parameters here like this. And for the label of it, I simply, for example, return user or whatever that you want. But I made a mistake. I should pass this label property to my text field instead of the autocomplete component itself. And also I need to pass an options array here. I simply pass an empty string because I want to show you something. And here on my component, you see that we have some text that we do not have control over it easily by default. And imagine that we have a multi-language project that we need to also provide these default values, for example, the no options text here, into different languages, which is pretty simple. You just need to head over to your theme object here, and exactly at the end, just add another comma and pass the language that you want. For example, if your application is Chinese, just pass the correct locale here and import it from the MUI material locale. Just don't forget to add it at the correct place of your theme. Now inside your application, you see that the no options value have been changed to the correct Chinese version of it. And now I'm going to share with you some pro tips. One of them is you should try to keep things inside your application modular, and I really prefer that my theme logic be separated from my application core logic. So inside the SRC folder, for example, imagine that we have a components folder here. Then I'm going to provide and I'm going to create all of providers related to our application inside. So I'm going to call it providers.tsx. And here, for example, I'm going to create a providers component here. Then I'm going to return something here. And then I'm going to specify the providers properties, and we're going to pass children as React node. Then I'm going to get them from my provider props and pass the children here and render them here. And then imagine that you have multiple providers here, but for this tutorial, we have only a provider called theme provider, and import it from correct place. And then for the theme here, just pass the theme for now. And at the end, don't forget to export it from this component. Now, I really prefer that to create my theme object as a hook. So inside your hooks folder or whatever that you want, create a new file called usetheme.ts or ts6 if you want to add some theme related stuff here. And here I just create a simple hook here that is going to return a theme object. You can customize it according to your needs. And at the end, I'm going to simply return theme from this hook. And at the end, don't forget to export this hook itself. And if you head over to our application, to our providers component, I just simply initialize my theme like this. And at the end, I simply head over to the main.tsx file and wrap everything inside a providers component. And here in the app.tsx file, I simply return everything, and I only return a simple button here. Call it button or whatever that you like. Let me just remove unnecessary stuff here, and then I just simply only import our button. Also inside the providers, don't forget to import the CSS baseline here because we have removed it from our previous file. And to show you how we can customize, we can do it as before. For example, I can open the palette object and change the primary color, for example, to something like, I don't know, purple. And then I can customize the default properties of my button. I'm going to change the default properties of it, so the default variant of it be contained, for example. But I remember that I made a mistake inside the providers component. Instead of importing use theme from this file here, I imported it from MUI itself, which is wrong. I'm going to remove it and import it from correct place from my project. And here you can see the default variant for button is contained and the color of my primary palette is purple. Imagine that you have a multi-language project. So you need to change the default locales provided by MUI components to be changed accordingly to the user preferred language, which is pretty simple. So we need a way to have access to the selected locale by the user, whether we are using React Context API, Zassen, Redux, or whatever. Here I prefer using Zassen, so I'm gonna stop the development server and install the Zassen package, and then again I run the development server. And here in the hooks folder, I create a new hook called user store, and then I simply paste this short snippet code here. Imagine that we have a project that it has default locales, one for English and one for Arabic. We define the state, the actions for it, and the type for our store. Then we're going to create a store with the default English locale and a setter function for it. Also, I have a completed Zassen course that I have explained these in it thoroughly. You can check it out. Also, you can persist the selected locale by the user into the local storage, so it will be persisted between refreshes. Now, inside the used theme component, I have access to the locale value by importing the user store from my component, and then I have access to the locale on the state, and the type of this locale will be English and Arabic. And then here at the end of my custom theme object here, I can check that if the locale is English, just render the US locales, otherwise the Arabic version of it. Hit save. Then inside my application, I can easily switch between different languages. So let me just remove all of things here. Then I simply create a toggle button group and import it from MUI. And I'm going to create a toggle button for English and pass the value English here, and another one for Arabic and AR for the text of it. Then I'm going to import my desired values from my store, the locale and its setter. For the value of it, I simply pass the locale itself. On the onChange event for it, I have access to the native browser event and also the new locale provided by this toggle button group event handler. Then here I simply call the change locale with the new locale here. And also, because I don't want the user to select multiple buttons of this toggle button group, I just use the exclusive property on this component so the user can only select one option. And to make sure everything is working, let me just wrap everything inside an empty fragment, and I just simply put this autocomplete here and import required imports, hit save. And here inside our application, you can see that whenever we are on English version, we have default locales, and whenever we are on Arabic version, the Arabic phrase is here. The MUI has the best RTL support that I've ever seen in a component library, which is pretty simple and it's without any issues. To use it, just head over to your use theme hook here, and I'm gonna add a use effect here to check that what is the current locale. If the locale is English, I simply change the document element, which is our HTML tag here, to LTR, and whenever we are on Arabic, because Arabic is an RTL language, we're gonna change it to right to left. And also for our theme, we have a direction value here. So whenever my locale is set to, for example, English, I simply return LTR, otherwise I simply return RTL. Hit save. Then we need to install some packages. One of them is a Stylist, which is a very lightweight CSS preprocessor. Then we're gonna create the MUI, a specific Stylist RTL plugin. And also because we are using TypeScript, I just simply need to install the types for a Stylist as dev dependency. Hit enter and again run the development server, and then just head over to your providers file this time, and here add these imports, the cache provider from Emotion, create cache function from Emotion cache, prefixer from Stylist, and also the RTL plugin from MUI Stylist RTL plugin. Then here create an RTL cache here with these values, exact values, and then just wrap everything inside your theme provider, inside the cache provider, and put everything inside it. And for the value of it, just pass the RTL cache that we just created here. And because we have a multi-language application that the user can change between different languages and LTR or RTL, we need to put everything inside this cache provider. So I just put the theme provider and everything inside it, inside the cache provider here. And beside RTL cache, I need to create another cache, call it empty cache or whatever that you want with whatever key value that you need. And here, let me just get the locale from my store, import it from state.locale. And I want whenever my locale is set to Arabic, I simply return the RTL cache and empty cache whenever it's set to English. Now, if you head over to the application, you see that whenever we are on English, everything is left to right, and whenever we switch to Arabic, everything become right to left. The ecosystem and community for MUI is really powerful, and they have developed so many third-party libraries. So inside the documentation, inside Discover More and related projects, we see that different dashboard makers, palette generators, enhanced components like OTP inputs, file inputs, color inputs, and even text editors, and an amazing utility to show toast messages, because the default implementation of MUI is missing something that this library has solved it. You can check these libraries out, and they are really high quality. MUI provides both free and paid templates, which you can check them out, but I do not guarantee the quality behind them. So at the bottom of the sidebar for MUI, there's a template store that you can click on it, and you can browse for different themes with different prices, and you can check them out, and even free theme palettes. Also, MUI provides a very detailed design kit for Figma or what designing software you're using. So here in the design resources, for example, in the Figma design kit, you have documentation how to get the community free version and full paid version, and you can use it inside your Figma designs. If you are using different CSS solutions or frameworks like Next.js or other meta frameworks for it, for React, MUI has thorough explanation that how we can integrate with different CSS solutions like Tailwind, Next.js, different routing libraries, and even the style components library instead of Emotion, that you can check them out. MUI has been developed by this in mind, that projects created using this library needs to be maintained for many years. So the new features or versions that release, they have thorough migration guide. Whether you are using from old grid solution, whether you are upgrading from 6th version to 7th version, we have here complete migration guides. So for example, if I open the upgrade to V7 version, you're gonna see what is changed here, what changes are breaking and you need to change them as soon as possible. And also some tools, let me just search for it, the code mod tool, which will automatically migrate your old MUI version to newer version. But I do not recommend it to do it like this because there might be some features to be missed. So always, if new version of MUI releases, just check the migration guide and do it step by step. Also, MUI provides many different other solutions like complex data grids, complex date and time pickers, charts, and all of them are really high in quality. This tutorial was only about the material UI part of things. And if you want to see more on the MUI, and if you want to learn more about the data grid, time pickers, date pickers, tree view, charts, and other MUI solutions, just let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching till this point of the tutorial. See you in the next video.